here, you can see. We had two lights on one leg, one light on the other. And if you had a balanced setup when you first plugged it in, everything was okay. We went to one place, set up, one light went way bright and the other one went way dim. Whoa, we got a problem. And we would check that before we started turning things on. I went back and checked where I had clipped in to a power box, power panel. And they had this big 4/0 cable there running to a kitchen, commercial kitchen range in this public building. But I found the end of the cable was taped off. The ground cable wasn't hooked to ground. Whoa, so we went back and hooked it, and of course we measured everything. We had a meter, a standard thing. We got the lights balanced out and got set up, but I told the people, you better have an electrician come and check this out. They'd hooked up an electric range, 220 volt, but they didn't put ground on it. We ran into a lot of stuff like that. This was a power stat, you can see up above the driver's left shoulder, and we would adjust that with meter till we got the thing. I went to, just as they started plugging things up in one day, remote, and I had checked everything out ahead of time. I said, okay, you can go ahead and take care of your other business, get here when we're getting ready to tape. Okay. Everybody was standing around sort of glassy-eyed when I came in. Whoa. And they said smoke came out of that. And they quickly unplugged, fortunately. Well, I'd gone into this place and checked it out, and they had a range with the plug, but it was all greasy and messy back there. And the technician was sort of not real keen on getting dirty, shall we say. And he spots over here another plug, which I'd checked out, identical plug, except instead of being 110, 220, this was 220 three-phase. Some of you know, whoa, you know, follow the directions on it. But we had some interesting things. So usually around town, we had places that were equipped for us to plug in. This is at the Newark High School Auditorium or Performing Arts Center. We're doing one of the remotes. It shows the camera, the tripod, the dolly, and we could come in there and just plug in. We had the gymnasium equipped. A lot of the schools that had a kitchen, home economics department, we could go in and unplug a stove and hook in. I did all of that. I knew a bit about electricity, and so that was something that I did. But we would go downtown Newark and tap into one of the commercial buildings and set up, and usually got along pretty well. I suppose today, if we were doing that, I would be in big trouble, but usually we could just go in and hook up. As long as we were doing TV, they didn't seem to bother us much. This is a production at night at the Board of Elections in downtown Newark. You can see the microwave dish on a tower. We had 3 or 4 sections of Roan tower and mounted the microwave transmitter on that. The audio was sent back by a landline, telephone line. We had several lines that we kept all the time around the area, and we could order up one if we needed, but the audio did not go on the microwave, just the video. Okay, again, the Channel 28 van as it appeared until 1970. We went to the Hartford Fair. We did a lot of programs there. And You can see a young lady coiling cables. Several of the people I contacted just recently had memories of cables, cables, cables. This is the engine compartment. I didn't show it earlier because I have a specific incident. We went to the Hartford Fair one morning to start our day, and the techie who was working with that had spent the night in the truck, said, truck won't start. Oh, yeah, got to dry the wires out. Oh, tell you later. Well, staying in the truck, and as needs required, he didn't want to make the trip. And he raised the lid and sort of had poor aim, shall we say. And he had to dry the wires out. See what we went through? What it's like to be a teacher for a high school. This is one of the fashion shows. It shows the camera in operation. You notice another modification that they did to the camera was to mount these blowers, fans up on the top. But this was a 4-H show. We worked a lot with the youth and 4-H. This is setting the lenses. Nothing automated on these. You set the lens f-stops according to what the light level was. And of course, cable. Everywhere, cable. We had camera cables, we had power cables, we had audio cables, and you'd run them out, and you can notice the figure 8 there. We were good at that. It's just amazing how the students picked up on that. And even in the back of the truck, we didn't use the reels. We had them figure 8. This is the camera storage compartment in the truck. The viewfinder comes off of the camera head. The full camera weighed about 100 pounds. And this is shot over there as it is right at the moment. You can see the rack mounts. You'd slide the camera bodies in there. They are sort of a vibration mount. Viewfinders were stored overhead in this compartment. And so you had to sort of do it yourself, put this system together every time you went out. We would require about an hour setup. It didn't take so much time really to set up as it did to get the cameras and equipment warmed up and stabilized. They were pretty finicky. And if you plugged them in, set them up, aligned them, in about a half hour or so, you got to do it all over again. So you might as well just wait. Somebody here is going to be surprised at this next shot. Anybody you recognize? Yeah, that's Tim's mother down there. I'm not sure who's behind the camera on that one. But again, it shows the dolly, cable, the lens turret, shooting a parade downtown. You can see the truck in the background. We were plugged into the Advocate Printing Office, which gracefully let us tap into their power supply down the basement, just down beyond the truck. And a little closer shot. And 2 cameras up on top. We added the pipe railing, and you can still see, I poked my head up through today, you can still see where. Okay, here's a picture out of a equipment manual, cameras. Camera controls, a switching system, a master over there in the back of these, a pulse shaper and a pulse former, and they are located in the rack underneath the camera and viewfinder storage in the truck. Here's the operator's position. On the left you can see the audio console. And I don't know much about that, where it was made, really. Maybe somebody can research that. The switcher, master monitor, and the camera control units. You could adjust the levels of the video signal with those. Here's another shot. And I discovered when I checked it out just recently and took this photo last week that instead of 1, 2, 3, somebody now has some 3, 2, 1. Why, I don't know. They've been working on them. Keep in mind that this truck has sat since '76, not being fired up. And those of you who work on things with electrolytic capacitors know what they're up against, okay? The switcher that's currently in the truck is one other change we made. It is not part of the original equipment. It has faders here. I never gave any thought to it. We bought it at a TV station auction, and I think it is part of the next generation, the 31 series rather than the 30 series, because the original didn't, well, you can't see it at all in that photo. This is a shot with me in my younger days, writing gain on the camera controls. Again, they were manual, not automatic. A director working a show. Here again is a shot of the switcher. And compare that with this shot. You see there's no fader handle on this at all. The part up here, this is a communications intercom. You plugged in, they were a carbon headset, and various lights, tele lights, things like that, but no fader. KCPX had modified and had a knob. And I've still got that, and I'll one of these days get that brought over here and reunite it with the truck. And I've got a few other things in my garage and my basement that maybe we'll find a home someday. And be like somebody said earlier, you know, let my children handle that. Well, some of it I hope to do something with before that. But you can see the difference in the switcher there. So I think this is the next model. I was trying to get a number off of it, and I couldn't see it over there today. Yep. Okay, here's the equipment, power supplies with the meters. This is part of the sync generator or pulse former, and this is the other section of it down here. You can see that in the truck when you check it out. Here's the book again on the TG10A field sync generator equipment. Here's the power supply, and they're all full of vacuum tubes. They glow in the dark, and they make a lot of heat. Part of the tower section and a rack up on top, and the camera. This is one of the studio tripods that it's setting on at the moment. We had two other similar cameras, which was nice because not only being familiar with it, they could swap back and forth if we needed. And we had one graduation we were doing, it was raining, and out of 5 cameras, we ended up with 1 working. But actually, we had very few problems with the cameras. This is the scanning circuitry, be on the camera operators. This is the back of the camera. They had also installed electronic orbiters. Those of you familiar with other tubes knew that after they were stationary a bit, the image would tend to stick or retain on the screen. And so what you did was very, very carefully move the camera up, and then over, and then down, and then back. You know, they called that orbiting. Well, somebody came out with an electronic orbiter, and it added a voltage to the yoke assembly to automatically orbit that image so that it didn't stick. Even then, when the tube became a little bit aged, it was hard not to have them stick. About the time that we shut down the station, MH Orthicon tubes were getting a little bit pricey. We found out from experiment, and we were always experimenting with something. We found out that we could buy a Vidicon camera with external sync and get one with a viewfinder for about the price or a little less than an MH Orthicon. And if we took the video out and jumped it into the back of that camera control unit, we could get gain, video control, all of those things, the big, heavy I/O cameras at that point. I have included a picture off of the internet. I just grabbed one. Those of you who've worked around cameras, this is a TK1131 for comparison. You can see the handle on the side on the door there. This again is the audio console. I had an email from one of our former students. We keep a website. I've got a list server, email list server for the station. And we keep in touch with a lot of the people that used to be involved. I mean, there's something special about it. There was then, there still is. And one of our operators was saying that a few times when the audio board in the station went down, they'd pull this one out of the truck and take it in, set it up and run it. I don't remember ever having this thing apart. I can't tell you what's in it. In 1976, the station was running out of money. You know what it's like to keep boards of education funded. A lot of levies coming up. Excuse me. It was it was decided that we'd shut the station down. And by that time, we had access to cable. Originally, they had the options. Do you build a cable system? Thank you.
Want another one too? Close to the engine compartment to clean it out.
So, what do you do with the truck? Well, I contacted the Ohio Historical Society. They'd contacted us when they had read in the paper that we might be going out of business. And they acquired a lot of the equipment, the studio equipment. And so I said, what about the truck? Well, they were excited to get it. They were planning on setting up a display of some type. But this, as you can see, is in their warehouse. Underneath the sleigh and equipment, among all of the, this is the front. You can see it's a sleigh there. And this is where that sign came from that, I don't know, you still got it over there? Yeah, that's where the sign came from. We never really considered it to be a historical vehicle. It was a working vehicle for us. And, you know, we clumb all over it, drove it here and there. I'll tell you, it's a real thrill to go up and down a 200-foot high hill. With wanted, that's another story. Right, John? And we'll talk about that tomorrow. So here it is, as it arrived here on the road again. The last of its kind, I'm told. The gentleman you see behind the camera, his brother is here today. The fellow in the photo is chief engineer or something out in Rapid City, South Dakota today. We had a number of people go things that have said this was an experience they will never forget. When there is no vision, the people perish. Are really grateful to Steve and the whole group for obtaining this van and putting it on display here. That's really something to walk in there and see that. So thank you very much.
That was great. This is a great presentation. Steve, what year will you get it operating? I was living in the back of the museum, but it's certainly a project that should be done. And
I've got a lot of stuff in my basement, but I can't guarantee it'll work any better than what's there.
we don't care. Bring it over whenever.
We were talking about that EVR earlier.
Right.
I got 2 of them.
Son of a gun. What a gold mine.
660s. I've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them.
Steve, have you got his address?
We've been talking.
I know. You're very generous, and this group appreciates it, and we just love the fact that people give the museum history, because without the history, the next generation or for future generations won't know what the heck you guys were up against in all the years you were active.
Yeah, they were having a ball doing TV over there. They didn't really care that we didn't have all the fancy, well, it'd have been nice, but they were doing things.
Right now they do TV with the cell phone. What do they need the truck for?
Yeah, right.
They stand out of their sunroof, aim the cell phone, and they're on the air. But we appreciate it as a group who are sworn to protect the energy that you guys had and the generations that built TV from the early days up until today. So thank you, Leland. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll be here tomorrow afternoon, at least a couple of us, talking about the truck and the station. I do have a website. I mentioned the email list. I get a lot of, so I screen pretty closely. If they're not somebody that I recognize, they have a hard time getting on that. But anybody can read the blog. Over in Maryland or somewhere. But I have a website that I'm trying to write the history of all of this and preserve it. And I'm trying to get comments from various people who had contact with the station so that it will not be lost.
Can we hang your jacket in the truck when we're finished? With the new emblem? Yeah.
I've also got one that says 28 on it.
We'll take both.
My wife would be glad.
Question.
You talk about the recorders. Do you have recordings? Do you have video tapes?
Yes.
Have they been transferred off yet?
No, we've talked about that. We've never quite gotten around to it. But many of those recordings still do work. They have not deteriorated that much, although on some passes, you have to clean the heads every now and then. But that is another hope.
Preserve it.
In the studio, did you not use any 16mm film?
I'm sorry?
16mm film, did you use that for recording or transmission on a film
We
chain?
used, in fact, I have a fairly two bellows It's in my barn.
We'll go into the dubbing business. I've got an attic full of 16mm sound film that we had produced back in the 60s that I want to convert, and we need the film chain. And Steve's got a black and white film chain. Chuck?
Yeah,
Yeah. By the way, I'm the one that reversed the CCUs last year.
yeah.
I tried to fire up CCU1. It didn't work at all, so I moved it down and moved CCU3 over so I could reach the monitors and the CCU at the same time.
But notice that when I was looking,
Change the lettering now, Chuck. Go ahead.
I'm curious why you had to use telephone lines for your audio interconnect. Didn't the microwave come with the audio mod, demod package?
Couldn't the microwave handle audio?
notice it was set up. We never even bothered. It was just so easy to call the telephone company and says, hey, hook us in.
Yeah.
We've got lots and lots and lots more adventures, but you haven't that much time.
One more.
Why did you change from 28 to 31? Were you forced to do that by the FCC?
What was the frequency change?
That's another long story, how we changed channels. Any of you in the Columbus area know that that is now a Fox station. The nationwide originally was going, that has WRFD at that time, was wanting to build a TV station on channel 41 or 47. Anyhow, that would interfere with the university's radio telescope. And one day, the university, the state network, people from nationwide who were trying to build the station came over and said, we have this problem. We need to change channels. And the only one that the FCC says can be moved to Columbus is channel 28. And you're on it. Can you help? Yeah. So there was a multiple swap at that time. The 40s, 41, 47 went that way, and I don't think they ever built on it. 31 was in Lancaster, it moved to Newark, and 28 moved to Columbus. So again, it's a rather involved, but you ought to hear some of the stories that come out of that channel change. That's another topic, that's another day.
Thank you. Look, tomorrow you will get hands-on with Leland at the truck in the museum in the afternoon. Right. And you can ask away and play, and Chuck will plug you in and maybe get something glowing. So thanks a lot, Leland. We appreciate it. Now, we've saved a goodie for last. A surprise announcement from one of our brothers here. You've all been restoring TV sets of one kind or another. And generally, I get a phone call, have you got a spare so-and-so? I need a broken thing, I can't replace it. I'm in trouble. Well, John took us out of our misery with the CT100s, making the horizontal convergence transformers, and I've got about 4 of them in operation now. And I got to tell you, let him tell you about, and explain to us, John, what you're able to do now to get some of us out of trouble during restoration.
I'm going to need some training here on the machine.
Here he comes. Here comes the coach. Darryl is here.
Yep, sir. Grab you. Should set the manual. And just, the arrow keys. Just left and right. Left and right? Okay. All right, well, you kind of spoiled my surprise already. Kind of spoiled the surprise already, but anybody who collects TVs has 2 main fears in life. For those of us who collect early color sets, it's double for both. We've already been through the fear, and I both decided to restore our 15-inch Motorola color sets. You've probably seen Bob's thread on his Motorola 16 CK1 on Video Karma. He did a beautiful job. I restored mine in parallel and had mine up and running when it ate its flyback transformer. Well, some years prior to that, there we go, the Lancaster PA they had was this coil winder. It came up on eBay, and I've always dreamed of winding flybacks, and I knew what a coil winder was.
Wow.
So I bought this thing off eBay, and before I had bought this machine, I had found a copy of this book, Coil Winding, by the George Stevens Company. These folks were sort of the go-to people for coil winders back in the 50s and 60s. And this book is somewhat of a high-level tutorial on coil winding, both for screw-driven machines and cam-driven machines. Just so we get clear, universal coil winding machine type of a coil where the wire crosses back and forth from side to side as the coil wind builds. You've seen these transformers and the like. Yep. This is a diagram of the surface pattern for a coil. If you take the circular coil, and universal coil winds consists of pushing the wire in a linear fashion back and forth as the coil builds. This is a case where you have, each time the wire crosses from one side to the other, it's called a cross or a crossover. This illustrates a coil with a crossover of 2. Well, the critical thing to build a self-supporting, mechanically stable coil is for the angle that the wire makes as it crosses from side to side needs to be between about 74 degrees and 86 degrees, with 78 degrees being the equation that gives the geometric relationships that you want to meet the 78-degree sweet spot. You have the diameter of the coil times pi divided by c, which is the width of the coil, and I can't read it. What's the other letter? Oh, n, which is the number of crosses per turn. Now this just illustrates the surface pattern of a coil as the machine starts to wind layer upon layer or turn upon turn. What you want each successive wire to lay right next to the other one, and the ideal spacing between adjacent wires is 1.25 times delta, where delta is the total diameter of the wire, including the insulation. Now, it turns out the way you achieve this, the way you achieve this linear surface pattern is to use this so-called heart-shaped cam to drive a shuttle rod back and forth. Heart-shaped cam gives you this surface pattern for each rotation on the surface of a coil. It also has the interesting attribute that if you draw a line, the distance from side to side stays constant. So you can build a cam follower with a shuttle rod on one side and a cam follower on the other, held together by a yoke, and squeeze them together with a little spring tension, and it'll follow that cam and trace out that pattern. This is an equation that shows the relationship or the equation for the gear ratio you want to set up to create that preceding surface pattern. And the unknowns or the variables in the equation are the delta, the total diameter of the wire. N is the number of crosses per turn. Q is called the winding cycle. That's the number of times to the same starting point. And C, once again, is the width of the coil. These show all the commonly used winding patterns with the number of turns and Q. And what you can see is as the coil gets skinnier and skinnier, the number of times you have to cross over per turn increases. And as this coil gets wider and wider, the number of times you cross gets fractional, and you have to spin the core many times before you cross from one side to the other. And it's all really determined by the geometry of the coil form you're winding, how wide it is versus the diameter. This is just a simplified diagram of the winding machine. It's driven by a fractional horsepower motor belt driven to the main shaft, which you have the coil mounted on. And off of that shaft, you have the one-to-one drive here to item number 2, which is called the driver or driving gear. It couples to item 3, which is an idler gear. That's 2 gears linked together on a common shaft that are freely rotate and are driven by the driving gear. They in turn couple to item number item 5 or item 6, which is the gear. The driven gear and then item 5, which is the heart-shaped cam, are pinned together on a freely rotating shaft and are coupled by the idler gear back to the driver gear. And then that, in turn, the heart-shaped cam drives the shuttle rod, which you have the wire guide attached to, which then pushes the wire back and forth as the coil turns. Now, the book contains a number of useful charts that allow you to figure out how to set this machine up. This one, I believe, if you know your wire diameter and you know the width of the coil you're trying to wind, this will allow you to draw a straight line between those 2 points, and you will be able to calculate your gear ratio, and then it gives you a 2-gear solution to set up the machine. Similarly, this nomograph crosses per turn, knowing the diameter of the coil and the what's the label on the other one there? The I can't read my own view graph, sorry. What's the label here?
Coil point, diameter, and...
Oh, and cam and coil form diameter and the coil form width. And then last but not least, this is one that allows you to calculate, oh shoot. Oh, the number of crosses, yeah, this is a number of crosses per turn calculator. Once you know R, the gear ratio you're trying to set up on the machine, you can go to this table, which gives you a 4-gear solution, which is a little more precise than the 2-gear solution. These are the various accessories that came with the machine. These are all the gears ranging from a 19. These are you set up for the driver and driven gears, as well as the 2 idler gears if you need them. These are the heart-shaped cams ranging from 0.082 inches to 1 1/4 inches. I have a bunch of different idlers here, 1-to-1 fixed idlers, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and then there's some user configurable idlers. Bob Gallanter has machined these 2 pieces that allow me to make an idler with any gear ratio I need to set up that 4-gear solution. This is a wire guide that is used to mount on the shuttle rod. And then these are assorted mandrels to hold the coil form to mount on the machine that Bob has machined up for me. Each time you have a different diameter coil form, you have to have a new set of those. This is just a picture of the transmission to drive the shuttle rod. Here's the driving gear, and it's 1-to-1 to the main shaft that drives the coil. Here's the idler, which is 2 gears stacked together. And then the heart-shaped cam, and behind it the driven gear and the shuttle rod. Here's a high voltage winding sitting on the machine and starting to wind. Of course, you can't see it winding, but believe me, it was very dynamic and exciting to watch it wind. The wire is in-fed off a spool that sits there, and up above that is a fancy wire tensioning device I had to buy. They were very proud of that, by the way. But that allows me to handle anywhere from 30 to 38 gauge wire and set proper wire tension. Another issue with winding flybacks is coming up with the right wire. It's not just ordinary enamel-covered magnet wire. They used a special Formvar varnish with a top coat that was slightly abrasive. It's called Grip Ease was the trade name. And another wire I'm experimenting with is some Celanese wire I found from surplus sales in Nebraska. But I haven't quite figured out how to use that stuff. It's a little harder to work with. Here's the first coil I wound for the Motorola 15-inch color set. This is the primary winding. It's everything but the high voltage winding, which was wound on a separate leg of the core. I coated it in silicon rubber and put it on the machine and drizzled the silicon rubber on it and let it cure in place, and that seemed to work pretty well. Here's a high voltage winding for the other leg of the flyback core, and I put epoxied a little terminal strip on there to bring out the high voltage lead. There's the two coils mounted onto the core and in the Motorola color TV. And with about an hour of runtime, it seems to work real good. Here's a second, I have a second one of those color sets, so I wound a second flyback for it. And this time I encased the windings, made a mold and encased them in silicon rubber. This is a prototype first attempt for a CT100 flyback. It's untested, so I don't know if it works right or not. I had to make some compromises in wire sizes because I couldn't find the kind of wire that they were originally using. And that's it.
John,
Any questions?
I have two questions, John. My Sylvania 451 that you're familiar with.
Well, I don't know. You might try going in there, and if there are any mechanical fasteners that hold the two halves of the cores together, try tightening those.
Can you build me a new one without the core?
No.
Oh, so you got to destroy what's maybe working.
You've got to have a donor flyback for me. I have to have the core
Okay.
as a, to put the coils on.
I may have a bunch of 630 cores.
Anybody else? Yes.
Can you rebuild the transformer without having the original data from the manufacturer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm reverse engineering from a sample in hand, so I'm going to unwind a flyback and count the turns basically and measure the wire and rebuild it that way. I am not smart enough to build one from first principles.
There's no formula to go from the millihenry or henry value measure?
Well, there are, but I'm not smart enough. You've got to use and things that I don't understand, and I'm an engineer. So I'm strictly copying what's there. If I don't have a sample to copy, I can't make one. Anybody else? Oh, I can't see you guys when you raise your hand, so.
A little off the subject, on your Motorola, do you have a substitute for the Victorine?
No, but Bob was very successful in replacing a Victorine with a 6BK4 and a couple of resistors, so that can be done.
But there was no other replacement of it?
Right.
Out of curiosity, how many turns on the secondary on your Motorola?
That was,
By hand, as you took flyback?
well, actually on the top maybe quarter inch of that winding was all fused together, and I had to just cut it off. So I had to guess. But guessing seemed to be close enough. I just wound one that was the same height and rounded to the nearest 100 turns and called it 1600. And close was good enough. Yep.
Any estimate as far as time it would take to get an idea together of various prices that you would charge to redo a certain type of coil, so that stores like myself would know what to tell a customer.
Well, I'm not ready to publish a price yet. You know, I've wound a grand total of 1 that works and 2 that might work. And I've got one potential customer who's desperate for one, so I've agreed to do one for him for a price. But I'd like to get a little more runtime under my belt. You know, there are a lot of subtleties in handling this wire that I may not understand. You know, one little nick in the wrong place and you're doomed. And I may not know I'm nicking the wire as I go.
I just wondered if you had a timetable as far as how long it would take to get up to speed to where we could get a formula in place as far as how to calculate your costs.
Well, to some extent, that's going to be, you know, how much risk does the customer want to assume? You know, I want somebody one tomorrow if they want to pay what I think is fair and assume all the risk that I might have screwed up not knowing how to do something. I'm doing this by braille. I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm doing the best I can. But if there are unknown pitfalls, you know, we may have to discover them.
Thomas Edison.
We may have to discover them together.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm reluctant to make guarantees that I don't know how to meet.
Be patient.
So,
Well, how much is the transformer you make from the CT100? Or do you have a price on that?
no, I'm not willing to publish a price yet.
Stay tuned.
No, I'm talking about the
You know.
one you make now, the convergence transformer.
Oh, the Convergence transformers, those were $200 a piece. And I didn't wind those. I just, you know, I paid somebody else to wind those and then
work.
added some profit margin on top of that.
They work. John, over
Yeah.
on the left.
Oh, go ahead.
How did you find the coil winder on eBay? Did someone tell you it was there? Did the original
You know,
seller know what it was? Or was it a contraption?
I don't recall the exact details of whether I just stumbled across it, whether somebody, you know, emailed me and said, "Hey, there's a coil winder." I don't remember those details.
But he bought it.
But yeah, I ponied up and paid a fair amount of money for that thing, hoping I could figure out how to use it someday. Somebody else thought they could use it too. And apparently they weren't here because nobody's complained.
Coil winders are usually pretty pricey.
Yeah, it's a lost art too. Well, actually, it's not true. George Stevens is still making them. You know, they're servo controlled now and probably software driven and probably a lot easier to use, but they're probably $15,000 or $20,000 too. I didn't pay quite that much. Anybody else?
I think Don's got a phone call. Thank you,
White House.
everybody, for your presentations. They were wonderful. Back over at the museum, 7 o'clock dinner. Anybody that's coming, we'll see you back over there.
Folks, we're going back to the museum. Silent auction is still on. Steve will be ready in a little bit to settle up some of your auction accounts. And John will be ready to collect more money. So see you across the road. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Don.
They come the monster.
Got any movies on here? We go out to a movie at dinner. Look at that. No. Got like Office Space and stuff, and Star Trek. And
Go away, go away, go away.
you don't want to watch that?
You know anybody that's got a 10-inch reel tape recorder? I got an attic full
Oh
of
boy.
podcast
No.
tapes. I gotta
Yeah.
look at it.
You know, it's getting harder and harder to find anybody with that stuff anymore, you
I
know?
just restored 2 real 7.5 inch, and now I need the big 15s. And I gave my machinery away.
That's the problem. Everybody, I get all my.